Ladies and gentlemen, it's time! Brought to you by Ringside, the best in boxing. It's the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast. Introducing first, fighting out of the Zapata Brand Studio in Berwick, Pennsylvania. He is an expert in boxing and bagels, Georgie Zapata!
Hey, fight fans, welcome to the Zapata Brand Podcast Boxing Edition, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too can get 40% off selected brands. Well, International Boxing Hall of Fame Fight Week continues this week on the Zapata Brand Podcast. My next guest is a trailblazer in the business of boxing, the First Lady of Boxing, Jackie Kallen. Jackie, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Big weekend this weekend. You're coming up here, going into the Hall of Fame, where you join the elites in boxing. So before we get to that point, let me go back a little bit. Who was Jackie Kallen growing up?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Who was I growing up? I was a very confident, very positive person. I've always been that. I wasn't very talented. I mean, I didn't have any coordination, so I wasn't athletic. I didn't play a sport. I wasn't a singer, a dancer, anything like that. But I loved interviewing, so I started my career as a writer. And I ended up being a journalist for 25 years. And I love that. You know, I'm a talker and I'm a people person. So for being able to interview celebrities like Elvis and Frank Sinatra and Michael Jackson and those people, that was great, you know, because like I said, being born kind of confident, it never was any big thing to me to be in the room with Elvis or Michael Jackson. So I was a perfect person to go into journalism because I was quite comfortable with it.
And that's the reason why I asked that. And you came and you said confidence. And in the world of boxing, and even me growing up in the world of boxing, I can remember the first time I saw you. It was on ABC Sports, James Toney, Dave Tiberi.
Oh, my God. You would pick that fight.
Well, I did, because here's why. After as the announcement was getting ready to be made, you were cradling James in the corner. You were kind of soothing his back. And then I said, the winner was James Toney. And you looked at him and said, like that. So I said, who is this person with James Toney? I did not know you were his manager. And then it started. But I will tell you, right after that, something that you did that struck me as very clever, very smart, and I knew you were a woman that was going to be around. You went into merchandising with James Toney, the lights out t-shirts. You pushed James Toney, which most managers should do, and hence why you're getting the International Boxing Hall of Fame induction. How was it with James Toney?
You know what? We had 6 years together that were absolutely historic to me because they're such a big part of my history. You know, I found James in 1989. He was a young kid in the gym. He had lost his manager I think he was shot or stabbed or whatever. He was killed. And he didn't have a manager. And we just kind of came together. I was with another fighter, Bobby Hitz, out of Chicago, a heavyweight at the time. He's now a promoter. And I just said, wow, this kid's got so much talent. And, you know, I had been involved in boxing for 10 years at that point, working with Emmanuel Stewart. I started working with him in 1978. I met him when I went to interview Tommy Hearns. He was training out of the, you know, Kronk Recreation Center, which no one had ever heard of it. It was just out of Detroit. He only had 2 fights. I heard Goodwin at the time. And he hired me as a publicist. And the goal was to get the Kronk gym known around the country. We did a good job of that. Of course, it helped having Hilmer Kenty, Milton McCrory, Tommy Hearns, Jimmy Paul, all the different champions that gym turned out. But I felt after doing that PR was a huge part of the business. If they don't know who you are, then there's no endorsements. There's none of the things that come along with it. And being a woman manager back 46 years ago when I got into boxing, being a woman, period, was kind of tricky because nobody knew what to make of a woman in the sport, plus a white woman. And so they assumed I was somebody's girlfriend, the promoter's girlfriend, the fighter's girlfriend, whatever. I don't think anybody gave me credit for knowing the boxing business or thinking that I was even involved on the business side.
Right.
Um, it was an anomaly and no one knew really what to make of me. So I had to prove myself. I had to establish the fact that I did know what I was doing and that I wasn't anybody's girlfriend and that this was a business that I chose. So it took a little while to establish that, but I hung in there. And now 46 years later, I'm still hanging in there.
Oh,
And it's
well,
my chosen profession. And I absolutely love what I do. As a matter of fact, one of my prospects is fighting on the Hall of Fame weekend Friday night fights, Mike Quan Williams. And he's out of Connecticut and this is his 23rd fight, no losses. And, it's what I love.
and that's what's amazing. Now, you said it, you kind of glossed over it quickly, and I wanted to go back a little bit. But Emmanuel Stewart, would you be as, I would say, as knowledgeable, because you were doing a different sports too, and you're doing celebrities and whatever. Would you be as knowledgeable as you are now with picking the right sparring partners, picking the right management, the way to go? Because that's a big key, because you can't throw someone in there too early. You can't throw someone in there who's over the hill. Was he key in your kind of navigating through this world? Because you were in the gym, you were wrapping hands, you were watching what these guys were doing. Was he a big, intricate part in your development?
Monumental, huge. He gave me the chance. He invited me into this world. He gave me a little bit of education as far as the pitfalls, what to expect, what the adversity and negatives were going to be. But he did teach me. He taught me all the things you mentioned and then some. I remember learning how to stop a cut. I remember learning the right way to wrap hands. And after a couple years of doing that, I worked with Art Door in the Tough Man contests for
Oh,
years. And I was always in the back wrapping hands of all these competitors. And I learned the proper way to do things. And
mhm.
like you said, picking the right fight at the right time is a huge thing as a manager. Understanding the psychology of the fighter that you're working with. Is he overconfident and he wants to get in too soon and he's going to get beat with the, top guys? Is he lacking confidence? Does he need to be boosted more? Is he nervous? Is he afraid to step it up because he doesn't know how good he really is? You have to really put a lot of time into managing a fighter on the personal end. It's not just negotiating a fight, it's the right fight at the right time and making sure that your fighter is in the right frame of mind. And, for me, when I started 46 years ago, they were close to my age. But then as I progressed, they were the age of my children. Now my fighters are younger than my grandchildren. So
Mhm.
long, long time in the business. And if you don't learn things after all these decades, then there's something wrong with you. So Emmanuel was my college education. He was my master's degree in boxing, and I wouldn't be here without him.
So let me ask you on that point. So you feel you have the confidence when you're there with the manual, and I'm not going to say you knew everything right at the beginning. What was your first time? When was the first time you got a little pushback, and how did you react to it, and how to go?
The pushback was there right from day one, right away. The first fight that I went to, as a publicist, handing out press kits, setting up the weigh-ins, the fight parties, things like that. It was always like, who are you? What are you doing here? Who are you with? Once I started managing, they didn't let me get in the ring with my fighters. The guy managers got in the ring. They wouldn't let me get in the ring. I couldn't go in the back and go in the locker room with my fighters like everyone else. Oh, women don't go in the locker room. You can see them later. I said, excuse me, I want to see my fighter and wish him luck before the fight, walk out with him. No, you can't do that. I
Hmm.
had sports writers that very prominent ones who came up to me and said, well, why don't you just go put on a bikini and be a ring card girl? That's where you belong. You could be carrying the card. And I never lost my cool. I never got involved in that whole Me Too movement of sexual harassment. I just kind of laughed it off and said, oh, I'll think about that. Or, oh, I didn't bring my bikini tonight. Darn. I kind of rolled with it, and definitely pun intended. I rolled with the punches. And eventually all of that stopped, I started being allowed to get in the ring, allowed to go into the back. I started going in the locker rooms, and the guys were just used to seeing me. So it was not a big thing anymore. And it took time, but I fought my way through it with, I think, with humor and with, I hope, a little dignity and this sense of, I know who I am. You guys aren't going to run me out of the business. So either learn to live with me
Mhm.
or don't talk to me, but you're not going to stop me.
So let me ask you: did your fighters initially have your back?
Oh, 100%. Bobby Hitz was my first fighter. And, like I said, was a heavyweight from Chicago. And he was my first fighter. And he calls himself my guinea pig because he was the one that we go to the gym together. And, oh, the other guys would tease him like crazy. That's your manager? Oh, right. What you going to do? Get in the ring and hit your opponent with her high heel? Or, oh, I guess you could always hide behind her skirt, or it was always some kind of a nasty comment. He got in quite a few fights sticking up for me. And then James came along next, and
Hmm.
James always had my back. There were a few incidents where he had to step up to the plate. And, James can be very intimidating and menacing. And there were times when he had to stick up for me in certain situations. And after the Tiberi fight, there was a lot of backlash because a lot of people thought that James didn't win that fight. And his fans, Tiberi's fans, some of them were very adamant about being upset. And they came after me with broken beer bottles. And they forced me and a couple of my other fighters into a bad situation that luckily we got out of without anyone getting hurt. But that fight led to a Senate investigation into boxing, which eventually led to the Muhammad Ali Act. So
Mhm.
something good came out of that. But my fighters have always had my back, and vice versa.
So let me ask you then: when you say that they've always had your back and what have you, um, and like I said, when you did this stuff, James was your prominent guy, so you're going to get a lot of heat on you to begin with, but you were able to deflect that heat a lot. And I'm an entrepreneur. I own a bagel shop. Okay, I own a bagel shop of all things.
I love bagels. That's
So I look at it almost like that. Like I have to put myself out there and promote myself to, to sell my bagel. No pun intended, but I got to kind of reinvent the wheel, every time I do something. Was that what you try to do with your fighters?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, they all have different personalities.
Mhm.
Every fighter's different. James was a hothead. He had a lot of fire in him. And some of the other fighters are much more mild mannered. Guy like Bronco McCart, who is my 154-pound champion, very sweet, mild mannered guy, very easy to work with. Every fighter, because they're different, like every person's different, you have to have a different persona with each person. You have to wear different hats at different times, and you have to know how to do that. And I'm very even keeled. I hardly ever get upset or mad. I don't worry about things because however they work out is how they're going to work out. Worrying doesn't do anything but waste a lot of time. And so I've never really had issues that I couldn't handle. And, I realized early on you're going to lose fighters along the way. They're going to leave, they're going to go with another manager. Trainers are going to move on and train other fighters. And, there were a lot of things that I learned from a manual to expect. So when they happened, I was prepared for it. So I learned not to lose my cool. I've never been sued. I've never been in arbitration. I've never had any negative issues that I couldn't handle. And I think that's a big part of anybody's success in any business is being able to handle what's thrown at you.
And one of the things, it's funny you said that. One of the things that I've said to a guy who owns the gym here, he has a lot of fighters, and I tell him the same thing. I said, and when he first got into it, I told him, you're going to get your heart broken a million times. I said, so get used to it. Don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. And I kid you not, about 6 months in, he got his heart broken. But it's part of the game. And I think you've handled it tremendously.
Thank you
Now,
so much for saying that. I've done my best. I can't say that certain things haven't hurt along the way, but everything in life is how you deal with it. how you handle it. And I've tried to handle everything with tact and diplomacy and not burn a bridge, because you may end up working with that same person again in one way, shape, or form. And so I don't get mad. I just kind of say, okay, that didn't work out, but hey, I'm here. If you need me down the line, you know where to find me. And oftentimes things have come around full circle because I left that door open.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't work for everybody. Some people say, hey, it's time to cut the line and let it go. I tried not to do that. And for me, that's worked. I'm not saying that's good for everybody, but
Right.
it's worked.
So let me ask you now, there's been plenty of victories. There's been plenty of memorable victories. There has to be one where either you were the underdog and there was no shot of you winning, you won, or there was someone that you've seen that worked so hard to get it and win. What is the most memorable one that you have personally? Doesn't have to, and I know they're all memorable for you, but give me one that sticks out where if you're going to tell a story, Jackie Kallen's book is going to be written. This is going to be in that book.
Oh, well, 100%. The James Toney Michael Nunn fight was that one fight in my life and in my history that made all the difference in the world. He was total underdog. Everybody told me I was really, really stupid to take that fight, that there was no way James could beat Michael Nunn, especially in his own backyard. But I thought he could, and I said, I'm going to take that chance. And that changed history for me and for James.
Now, was that a money issue or no?
No, money was never a part of it.
Okay.
Nothing to do with it. It was just people did not feel James was ready for that big of a fight. And he had beat Murky Sosa, which was a tough fight for him at that time. But a lot of the writers thought after the Dave Tiberi fight that James had been exposed, that he wasn't really as good a fighter as people thought he was. And that by taking that fight, actually, I think it was the other way around.
Yeah.
I think Tiberi was after Michael Dunn. Tried
Tiberi
to
is after
30 years ago. But taking that fight was risky. But I believed that he would win. And I always believed in James. I thought James was probably one of the greatest fighters that I'll ever work with, offensively and defensively.
Oh yeah, tremendous fighter. James was sparring. My good friend is one of his was one of his chief sparring partners, Jason Gavin, when he was going to heavyweight, and so I know of how he could be. But let's fast forward to this weekend. Induction to the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Jackie, when you get that phone call, because they usually do it a week before, and then they tell you. What was your emotions like when you got that call?
Well, it's hard to describe because James got in a couple years ago, and I always thought that when he got in, maybe we'd go in together. But he got in and I didn't, and so that was okay. I felt it wasn't my time, and then I found out that this year I was on the ballot, and all I could do was like cross my fingers and hope that the voters on the panel who vote for me would give me the opportunity to have this honor. And then I got the phone call that I got in, and it was just such a great validation after all these years to know that a female boxing manager was going to be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. I don't know that there's anybody following in my footsteps to the point that they'll ever get in there, but I certainly hope so. I hope I'm the first, but not the last.
So let me go to your family. When you first started, and I don't know your parents' situation, but when you first started boxing management and going along that route, number one, did they think you were crazy? Number two, did they ever think you'd end up in the Hall of Fame?
I wish they were both alive to see this. Of course, unfortunately, neither one is. But there was no Hall of Fame when I started. Then when I found out there was one, I've been involved with the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. I'm in the California Sports Hall of Fame. The World Boxing Hall of Fame in California gave me the Eileen Eaton Award. She was a big promoter at the Olympic Auditorium in LA long before I came on the scene. And this is the pinnacle. And so I did dream about it once I started to see people I know getting in.
Mm-hmm.
But year went by and another year went by, and nobody mentioned me. So I just thought, you know what, maybe it's not meant to be. And then I got the call in December and they said, you're in. And it was just amazing to know that I'm a legacy now in the sport, and that hopefully that'll encourage other women who might be interested in boxing to give it a shot. It's not easy. If it were, I think there'd be a lot more women in boxing than there are. And I think that the men are still, I won't say chauvinistic to the point like it was 40 years ago, but it's still an old boys club. And there are some really wonderful women that I've met along the way, Serafina and Rachel Charles, and some other girls that are involved, Gwen Leggy now, and some of the other girls that I've met that are involved in the sport. And I love seeing that. And I hope and wish that more would come on board, because it's a very gratifying sport to be involved in. The guys treat me like a queen, and I'm just still as enthusiastic now as I was back at my very first fight.
Well, Rachel Charles is a good friend of mine, and she speaks the world of you.
Uh,
Um,
she's a great girl. She's a wonderful girl. And, when I see these girls that come along, I want to reach down and pull them up and encourage them as much as I can, because I've noticed in this world, and it's not just with women, it's men too, people reach a certain height and then they cut the rope in the ladder behind them. They don't want the competition. They feel threatened by other people. I want to help anybody that's coming up in this sport, and especially other women. I've made myself so available all the time to any females that want information, that want encouragement, that want knowledge, just anything they want to learn about the sport. Because when I started, there were none. There was no one I could go to. So I hope I can be that little beacon, that light for somebody else.
and on a flip side with that, was there ever a time when you said, "I'm done," and didn't want it?
No,
Really?
not once. Never. I love it. I love what I do. I love the challenge of every new fighter that I start working with, and I can shape them and mold them and sort of be like a den mother and sort of be there to answer their questions, to help them with even the personal things. I've helped guys open their first checking account. I've got their first credit card, shop for their first car, their first house. Being part of their development in and out of the ring is something that's very important to me. I'm not just there to get a fight, show up, get my commission, and then leave. I want to be part of their everyday lives so that they know me and I know them, and they're all part of my network, my family. And it's been great because I have two sons. I got involved when they were 6 and 7. So they've come on this journey with me, and they've gotten to know all the fighters I've worked with, and they're still friendly with and in contact with most of them. And so it's been a real family affair from the very first fight all the way till now.
Well, finally, wrapping it up, Jackie. Um, what what do you what are your hopes for the future of boxing, and not just the female part, but the male part too? Because to me, it seems like the money's drying up. Well, you got the Saudi money, I get that, but when you have people like a Canelo Alvarez getting 35 million a fight, and there's nobody making, you can't make that kind of money, or from a promoter or management, you can't. You're not going to make that money back, especially with the theft and the stealing and the piracy. It's not going to happen. What's your hopes of the future of boxing? And if there was a suggestion, do you have one?
Well, that's a really good question. I think about it all the time. Back in the day when I started, we had network TV. There was fights all the time for free. People could watch, like you said, ABC, NBC, CBS. We had Gil Clancy, and we had, Nick Charles on HBO, and we had all the outlets for these fighters to be seen and developed, and people got to know them and follow them. I don't know that there's as many marquee fighters, where people that aren't boxing fans recognize the name. I mean, obviously the Muhammad Ali's, the Mike Tyson's, the George Foreman's, those guys, Floyd Mayweather. Everyone knows them. They've made a fortune and made a mark in the business. But there's so many talented fighters today that nobody sees. If you don't go to the streaming outlets like DAZN and, Fight TV and all Pro Box and that, where would you see fights? And if you're of the older generation where you're not as computer savvy and you don't watch the fights that way, there is no more NBC, ABC, CBS. There's not even any more HBO and Showtime. That's all the old days. It's a different business now. There's no signing bonuses and there's no, big paydays for these fighters coming up. The 4, 6, 8 round fighters, they're not making a lot of money. And unless they get up to the top echelon, and then you've got the guys like Jake Paul and Logan Paul and these internet guys that are doing very well and making a lot of money. They are shedding a light on the sport, which is great, bringing in fans that we might not have. But are they taking away the money that these kids that have fought in the amateurs for years and years might have been getting? I don't know.
Well, here, I'm going to expand on that point a little bit. And here's why I think you did very well with James Toney, with his marketing, his merchandise. I've never saw any marketing, merchandising from any fighter until I saw James Lights Out Toney's t-shirts in Ring Magazine where you could buy it. I never saw that. Here's the problem I look at for boxing to make a superstar. Obviously, we don't have HBO boxing Showtime. That's gone, okay? But let's take Terrence Crawford. When Terrence Crawford beat Errol Spence, okay, it was a year ago, okay? And he went on Joe Rogan's podcast. He was all over the place. I had people who didn't know boxing say, who's this Terrence Crawford guy? For 1 whole year, I heard crickets. You don't see him anymore. That's a problem. Jake Paul is in front of your face.
That's a big problem. And social media has become very important to fighters. If you don't have a social media following, you're not very valuable to DAZN and the network because they want to bring in automatically your fan base. And how does a young fighter develop a fan base if he's not on national TV? It's a tricky thing. The smart ones have social media following, but not every fighter knows how to do that. And it's a different business than it was. And you're so right about that. It's very tricky and it's very hard. And making the big bucks, it's, a lot of guys are going into basketball and football rather than going to the gym because they can get a contract the first year and make great money. And they may never make that in 8 years of boxing.
Mm-hmm.
So we are losing out on a lot of potential champions that are going into other sports. MMA, bare knuckle. I mean, there's other options for them.
Well, wrapping this up, I could tell you, Jackie, it has been an absolute honor, and you are absolutely deserving the induction that you're going to get this weekend. It is an incredible. You don't know, from my childhood, I've seen you all the way up, and you look tremendous. You are a beautiful woman still to the day I saw you.
You know how to make an old lady feel good. I just turned 78.
Are you kidding me?
No, so I'm a couple years from 80. So to get a compliment at my age is a nice thing. So you just made my day.
Wow. Well, hopefully your day will be made on Sunday when you get that induction that you so deserve.
And are you going to come up and talk to me in Minnesota?
Absolutely. I will be there. I will come up and I'll see you. I will be there on Saturday. I will not be going to the fight because my wife, because it's a turning stone, but I'm not staying over. So I got to get back. Sunday's a big bagel day. It's a big bagel day. So I got to get back.
But come over so we can take a picture together.
Absolutely. No, I have, my business is based around it's bagels, and it's our bagels will knock you out. I have all the pictures of my career up there and everything else. My kids fighting, I have them all up there, and I put I have Tim Witherspoon's pictures up there. He's a good friend of mine. So it is around, and that's why when I go there, I'm going to take as many pictures as I can. You are definitely one that I need to have on this wall here. It's called the Wall of Champions.
I love it. Thank you so much. Believe me, I live on bagels. Just give me everything bagel or an Asiago or a Bialy. I'm happy.
Between you and Fred Sternberg, I got a whole bunch of bagels to bring up.
Oh, there you go. I'd love that. See you Saturday.
I will see you Saturday. Thank you, Jackie.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.